Hazards are part of our world. They come to us in myriad forms, disregarding borders and boundaries, unmoved by the lives they touch. They visit us again and again in a recurrent cycle of emergency and relief. Often, they're not unpredictable events, but well-established and familiar visitors.
How do we get our hands around these issues? How do we bring together the humanitarian and development communities with a single, integrated approach to risk reduction and resilience? What does it actually mean to measure resilience? And how do we do so in light of the ever-growing threat of climate change?
In my organization, we see disaster response and DRR issues separately, and there is a scope and room for integrating that emergency response or disaster response and DRR issues.
L'intégration de nos approches.
Having two separate approaches to climate change and disaster risk reduction does not result in efficient intervention or a long-term vision of resilience. Putting two approaches together has the advantage of breaking down barriers and bringing together different actors and experts.
Toward Resilience is a product of the ACB project. Speaks to the humanitarian and development communities with a single, integrated voice on reducing risks, adapting to climate change, and increasing resilience. Over 160 practitioners working across 12 countries have contributed their first-hand experience to the guide. Built around 10 overarching principles, the guide references numerous case studies and addresses key vulnerable populations and sectors. Toward Resilience is a practical guide created by the field for the field.
The integrated approach is important because at community level, there is nothing called a water sector or economic sector or education sector. For the community, the issues they deal with on a day-to-day basis is holistic.
Toward Resilience does not try to replace our current policy, but helps complement and advise this policy. The integrated approach makes sense because disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation are often based on the same concepts and have similar goals and objectives.
For me, this guide is a consolidation of the current plethora of knowledge surrounding the issue of disaster risk reduction and resilience building. So it makes it very easy for us as practitioners to have one source of information which we can use in our program planning and designing.
How do we prepare ourselves before the emergency comes so that we can reduce the impact? So this guide is really important in that it helps us to prepare or to support communities to start thinking about the way they can start preparing themselves for a disaster that they know is really going to come their way.
Climate change is already with us. We look out now over a rapidly shifting landscape of needs and resources, a landscape of unprecedented challenges. We cannot eliminate hazards. They will always be with us. But we can understand and prepare for these challenges to prevent them from becoming disasters. Toward Resilience is a powerful tool in this process.
Hello, my name is Ann Castleton, and I'm from Mercy Corps. And these are my colleagues Isabel Ramad from Oxfam, Richard Rumsey from World Vision, one of the authors, Maralise Turnbull, who formerly from Oxfam, and Amy Hillebo, another one of the authors, and also from Catholic Relief Services. So we're obviously pitching this book that we have has just come to fruition, and what we're going to do is each of us tell you in about 2 minutes our favorite parts of the book. But first we want to say that in your delegate bags there should have been a flash drive which has this book on it in 3 languages. We have some of the hard copies at our booth, booth 15, and if you are really a person that wants a hard copy and wants to take it home and promises you will not leave it in your hotel trash bin, and you will give us your business card, then you can have a hard copy if you would like. But we just want you to know that it's all available. Wait. It's all available on these flash drives that most but not everybody had in their delegate bags. So we're going to start with Amy.
Okay, thank you. We wanted to just share a little bit about what our favorite things are about the guide. And one of the things for me is that it was a highly participatory process. It took about 2 years to produce, and we had numerous perspectives throughout the process. We cataloged about 1,600 comments and took those into consideration in the various drafts. And I think it really did result in a much richer, deeper, useful product. So though it was time-consuming and sometimes very frustrating, that's one of my very favorite parts of the guide.
Hi, I'm Mary-Elise Turnbull. I'm competing with the other woman who's announcing over there. Can you actually hear what we're saying? Okay. So I like all of the resource, obviously, but one of my favorite parts, and you've got it on the bookmark that's on your seats, are the principles. So basically you'd say, where did these principles come from? How did they make them up, or where did they get them from? The principles of an integrated approach to DRR and CCA came from practitioners. They came from hundreds of contributions of do this, don't do that, what has worked, what hasn't worked, which we then compared with some very important published reports, such as the previous global assessment reports, the SREX, the report on extreme events, many other resources that exist on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, looked at all their recommendations, looked what was in the HFA, and then said, okay, these are the 10 most important principles for working in any context and in any sector. You have your principles here. So you have increased understanding of the hazard and climate change context, increased understanding of exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. Often we leave out one of those things. So we look at just the hazard context, but we don't look at the climate change context, for example, or we don't think about vulnerability. We just look at the hazards. Recognize rights and responsibilities, because we believe that resilience is a rights issue, and with rights go responsibilities. And though that paves the way for programming together with advocacy. Strengthen participation and agency of the population at risk. People at risk have to be the ones who are leading the process, and we have to facilitate that. Promote systemic engagement and change. So we know that resilience and disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation don't belong to one sector. They need multiple contributions and actions from all sectors. And that goes the same with foster synergy from multiple levels, requiring kind of horizontal engagement and vertical engagement. Drawing on diverse sources of knowledge. So we have, for example, very technical scientific knowledge combined with local knowledge, a very important principle. Instilling flexibility and responsiveness. To a certain extent, we don't know what's coming, and so any program needs to be prepared to respond to emerging knowledge, emerging issues. Addressing different timescales, extremely important from a climate change adaptation point of view. And last of all, do no harm. Everything we do has to respect that principle. I would be very interested, we'd all be very interested if you have a chance to look through those principles and what's written about them on pages 11 and 12 of the guide. And we challenge you, if you find one of those principles that you think is not important, doesn't need to be there and could be replaced by another one, come and tell us on our stand, which is number 15. We'd be very, very pleased to listen to that. So have a look and see if you can challenge us on that.
It's been a fascinating experience being part of this process, developing this book. Our industry is actually full of multiple policies and principles, but what I found most useful about this book is that it actually takes those policies and principles and turns them into practice. This is the question that is being asked so much around our sector at large, is how do we actually get our hands around this? How do we actually make things work in practice? And so the principles that Marilise has just highlighted can be found in a food security sector of the book. So how do we actually do risk assessment as it relates to food security or water and sanitation programming? And that's where it really starts to hit the ground and address the needs of practitioners who are trying to implement programs to build resilience for the long term. So that's how I found it most useful.
Thank you. I don't have a favorite part. I like all of it. And I'll be very pragmatic. As a regional advisor, I receive lots of requests from country teams. And what's really good with this book is that I can easily navigate through it. It's so simple, it's so well organized. So I can easily come up quickly with a few good options for country staff for any type of request. And I also give them to them and then just look at it. You won't take more than 5 minutes to find your own solution and options that you can test after.
And my favorite part is the tools and resources at the end on page 133. And besides the fact that these tools have been well vetted by the authors and all the agencies, and we annotated them so you don't have to click on a link until you actually know what you're going to get. And they're organized by chapters. So after you read the food security chapter, then it has a list of the resources just related to food security. And after you read about livelihoods, and after you read about the urban context, it's all organized around in that way. So I love these tools and resources. And there may be some that don't work, but we haven't found any yet. We really went through them carefully. So that's it. Thanks. Oh, yeah.